Please give a warm Nonprofit Storytelling Conference welcome to Tammy Zonker.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. And good morning, everyone. Good morning. Day 3. So I acknowledge those of you who had the discipline to go to bed at a decent hour so that you could be here bright and early for the first session of the Day 3 of the Nonprofit Storytelling Conference. So today we're going to talk about the different approaches that buffalo and cows take to surviving storms. Right? How many of you feel like you're fighting some storms in your work right now, or maybe even in your life? Right? We all have storms. So I feel like we're going to learn some leadership lessons from the way that cows and buffalo approach storms, and maybe have a few insights about ourselves and how we approach storms and stressors. So, New York Times best-selling author Rory Vaden lives in Colorado. And he talks about the beautiful mountains, the Rocky Mountains there on the west side of the state. And then the beautiful plains toward, the Kansas plains toward the east side of the state. And because of the unique topography there, it's one of the few places in the United States where cow and buffalo roam. And so it's interesting how they each respond to storms. So when storms come through Colorado, they almost always start over the Rockies and move toward the east and move toward the plains. And so what cows do when those storms are coming over the mountains and they sense it coming, they turn, they gather, they turn, and they run away from the storms. They run. And what that happens is, the thing about cows is that they're kind of slow. They can only run 25 miles an hour top speed, and at that, they can't sustain it very long. And so inevitably, the storm catches up with them, and they end up running with the storm versus past the storm. And it's not so smart. And yet, we as nonprofit professionals, we kind of do the same thing. Right? When we have storms in our lives, maybe it's a disagreement with a board member or our CEO or our executive director, we kind of run from it. We shut down, we don't talk it out, we don't share our contrasting perspective. Or maybe we're working with a colleague or a leadership team member and we disagree with the direction that they're taking. Do we express our ideas? Do we push back? Not always, right? And so maybe, too, there's a donor who has a misconception or has bought into some untrue stereotype about the people that we serve and the challenges that they face. And do we take the time to talk with that donor about the reality, or do we just get quiet and we nod because we fear risking the gift if we pause and correct their perception? And so we don't do a service to ourselves when we run from the storms. So let me talk about the buffalo. Buffalo take a very, very different approach to storms in their lives, right? So when they sense a storm that's coming over those Rocky Mountains, they gather together, they turn toward the storm, and they run with all their might. They run into that storm. They hit it head on. And what happens is they actually run through the storm, reducing the amount of pain and suffering and loss of life that the storm can sometimes create. And so I think there are some real leadership lessons for us facing the storms in our lives. And we all have storms, right? We all have storms in our lives, and we all want to get to the other side. Now, those storms might be personal storms. Maybe some of us are facing, financial challenges or health challenges, our own, or maybe we have aging parents, or maybe we're raising teenagers or kids who have come through a pandemic and we don't really even know how to deal with the aftermath of what it was like for them and that re-entry, that socialization. So we don't know. There's all these personal storms, and of course there are professional storms, right? We have a donor retention problem. We have leadership problems. We have problems attracting staff. There are a lot of professional challenges, a lot of storms that we're facing. And I think we can learn a lot from the buffalo so that we can come through these and actually thrive. So here's what we know about human beings. We typically have 4 responses to stress. The first one I'm sure you've heard of, fight, right? Fight. Well, I'm going to resist. I am going to speak up. So we're going to fight. That is our, the response to stress. How many of you are typically fighters? Yes, I see some hands. And it's situational, right? You might fight back at home because there's trust and love, and you know that fight, that disagreeing, the debate is not going to harm your relationship. But maybe we don't fight so much with our board members. Like it's situational. So fight is one response to stress. The second response to stress often is flight, right? I'm out of here. Either we leave our organizations, we withdraw from that committee, or maybe we can't leave. Maybe it's your team, you want to leave, but you don't. But you scale back, you shrink, right? So you kind of leave while still being there. The other common response to stress is freeze, right? So you're walking along, there comes that conflict, and you just stop. Freeze. So you're there, but you check out. And then the fourth response to stress is called fawn. Now, when I give this talk, a lot of people haven't heard of fawn. And here's what fawn looks like. You hear someone say something, you know it's off base, you vehemently disagree, but it's leadership, it's a board, it's a donor, and so you go, right? You're smiling, you're nodding, and in your mind, you're thinking, this is never going to work, right? This is dead wrong. What do I do? All right, so these are the 4 natural responses to stress. Now, there's another phenomenon. Again, we keep layering here, and it's called herd mentality. So often, herd mentality, as you can see the full definition here, but essentially, it's when we go along with the crowd. We go along with the thought leaders, or maybe we're just ingrained. Like, we're just going to do this because it's what we've always done. And we stop thinking. We just go along. We're a good team player. Now, I'm all about team, but I'm also about teams that think and debate and come up with the best next thing, right? So herd mentality can shut down innovation. Herd mentality squelches people's voice. Some people will look to you as leaders in your organizations, and they'll think, gosh, if Larry's not speaking up, I'm not going to speak up. I'm going to go along too. So when we think about herd mentality, I want you to challenge yourself a little bit this morning. I want you to think about, where does best practice intersect with innovation? Right? Like, best practice may have served us well until this point, but what's next? Right? Have I used best practice as a crutch? As a reason to do what I know I'm really good at doing, what I'm comfortable doing, what we already have systems and processes to do? So we need you to really step up, to express yourself, to share your ideas, to take that risk and truly step into the leader that you were born to be. And even though I know there are many leaders, you are all leaders in this room, there's a next level for every single one of you. And there's a next level for me. This is a process. All right, so how do we overcome herd mentality? Well, psychologically, there are a number of steps. The first one is just, first of all, be aware of your own stress responses. Know, like, gosh, in the workplace, with my team, with my board, I tend to freeze. I tend to fawn and become more aware, more self-aware about what you're doing. Seek diverse perspectives. So when you are in those conversations, or you have that moment where you want to fight or you want to freeze, I want you to just ask a better question. Like, that's a really interesting perspective. Would you say more about that? My natural response is X. Help me understand why you feel like Y is a better solution. Really, I want to learn. Right? I want to learn. So again, ask a better question. Get diverse perspectives. Take time to think. This, I think, is one of the biggest challenges that we have in the nonprofit sector, and that is we are so busy. The volume of work combined with the scarcity mentality that is so prevalent from a cultural perspective, with every organization I've encountered to varying degrees, it creates a space where we are just doing, and rarely pausing to think, to reflect, to connect the dots, to consider other solutions or other possibilities. I mean, we need to take time and just take a breath. How many of you feel like I need to breathe in my schedule? I need to breathe in my work. Yes, and I have walked in your shoes. You know, I have ate my lunch over a steering wheel on the way to a major donor visit. I have, I've signed up for a webinar or an online class I'm so excited about, and people are popping in my office. I'm distracted because I'm trying to do too much at once, and I'm not blocking time. I'm not taking time to think. And maybe I'm not speaking up. Maybe I think, well, I'm just a manager here. I'm just a director. Oh, it's a board member, right? So again, we need to speak up. And sometimes speaking up it can mean making a statement. It can mean also asking a question. And then consider alternative sources of information. So if your primary source of information is Nonprofit Pro and Chronicle of Philanthropy, which I love both of those publications, or maybe your local AFP chapter. Again, I've been an AFP member for 20 plus years as soon as I moved into the profession. But what are other sources of information that might balance? Think about even, and I'm not going to get political here, but here in the US, we're really politically divided. And I have a tendency to lean one way, but I also will listen to another perspective. I may switch to a different news outlet to really try to understand the other point of view. Now, it may change my opinion or influence it in some way, or I may remain dedicated to my belief system politically, but at least I took a moment to try and understand the other side. And I encourage you to do that in your work as well as nonprofit leaders and as fundraisers and as storytellers. So what are some of the stories? Let me back up. What are some of the stories we tell ourselves? The disempowering stories that don't help us, that keep us quiet, that keep us in that herd mentality. And you can just shout them out. I'll repeat them for the video. Somebody else has the idea. Or, she's a director. It's not my job to come up with the solution. Yeah, great, Tova. I saw another hand. Yes, oh, Mark. That's the way we've always done it. I think that resonated in the room. Absolutely. What else? I'm just one person. People don't think I know what I'm doing. Do you know what you're doing? Of course you do. What's that? It's too complicated. Yeah. So there are stories we tell ourselves that keep us small, that don't really honor your lived experiences, your training, like the brilliant solutions that you can bring to this. We fall back on these disempowering stories. So I did a little Google search, and here are some of the ones that are the most prevalent, and many of them you referenced here. Mark, it's just the way we do things around here. I'm just your title. I'm just a coordinator. I'm just the chief philanthropy officer, right? No matter where in the org chart your position is, there's always some level higher, always. Board members may say, I'm just a board member. And you may have heard that. I'm just a volunteer. All right, so I'm not smart enough or good enough. That comes up a lot as well. I don't have enough experience. I don't have enough time. Now, I am mostly confronted where the one that comes up for me is I don't have enough time. Because we do a lot. And there's a limited amount of time, right? I mean, I actually think that time is more precious than money. I can make more money. I can't make more time. But I can make wiser choices about how I spend my time, what I prioritize, how I stop doing. How many of you are Jim Collins Good to Great fans? Yes, and Jim Collins talks about not adding to your to-do list, but creating a stop-doing list, right? So again, we need to manage our time. I know you can't make more time. So that's one of the disempowering messages that we often share or think to ourselves. Now, there's a quote I love. This is a book title as well, and the title is Let's Get Real or Let's Not Play. Here's the thing. You join the nonprofit sector to make a difference because your heart is so big and you are so passionate about this cause. Or maybe, you took on this position because it looked like a great job, but then there was the moment that you fell in love with this mission and it really became part of your identity, your purpose in life. And so what happens over time is we get kind of tired. We get worn down. And I felt that too. I mean, I have sat at the executive leadership table as the chief philanthropy officer. And in the beginning, I had all these great ideas. And they said, that's fantastic, Tammy. Go ahead and do that. Oh, well, I also have this other, these accountabilities. I'm not sure that I should run the foster parent recruitment campaign, right? I'm a fundraiser. So I see why sometimes we shut down because we're like, I can't take one more thing on. And I have this experience that every time I have a great idea, it becomes my job, right? And that's so tricky. But let's get real or let's not play. I want you to get back to that place that you were in the beginning, but better because you have all this lived experience now. You have all this additional education. I mean, you're here at the storytelling conference. I know I have learned so much. I'm sure you've learned so much to take back and add to your already brilliant array of tools and skills at your nonprofit. So it's time to really step up as a leader and get back to that place where you are fulfilled, you are leading. And that means also you are disciplined enough to make the choices that serve you and serve your organization. All right, so I want to take some call outs. So I'm looking for short sentences. What are the biggest fundraising challenges that you're facing at your organization? I heard recruiting new donors. Yeah, so the counter of that is, do we also have a donor retention problem? We're trying to replace people. What else?
Shortfall?
Financial shortfalls? Yeah. The needs continue to grow, and our fundraising results don't always keep pace. Brilliant. What else? Staffing. How many of you have vacant fundraising or marketing positions right now? Absolutely. It's a real issue.
Unrealistic goals.
Unrealistic goals. Did you have a voice in creating those goals? Probably not. You know, what happens so often is that whomever is creating the budget, or maybe you submit a budget and they say, that's nice, we need to mark that up by 20%, right? I call that faith-based budgeting, right? We're just gonna pick a number and pray. That's what we're gonna do. Versus a data-informed, human-centered fundraising plan and number. Yeah, how many of you feel that pain? Yes, all right, very good. It wasn't like a yes, it was a yes, yes. All right, so there was a recent study done. It was published by Nonprofit Pro in collaboration with Fondant, who I think is one of our exhibitors here today, one of the sponsors. So they did a significant survey, broad survey, and identified the 3 biggest challenges. And honestly, you have nailed them on the head. The first is a reduction in the number of U.S. households giving. And if any of you, do we have some Canadians here or folks from other, yeah, oh, my Canadians. So you're having a similar challenge, right? There is a reduction in the number of households giving, and it's within those lower gift values, and we're going to talk about that in a moment as well. We also have economic uncertainty, right? Stock markets up and down. Inflation, I mean, it's moderating now, but it's been at very high levels. Unemployment, thankfully, is low, but there's a lot of uncertainty, which has our supporters kind of holding back at times. And it certainly has our organizations very, very nervous. So how's it going to affect giving? Lack of resources to deliver on our mission. And those lack of resources, as you've identified, are absolutely qualified staff, but also the technology and the tools, right? I have, in my 25 years plus of fundraising, I have never seen innovation scale at the rate it's scaling right now between artificial intelligence and behavioral modeling and text and video messaging and communication and like all the things. There's so much to consider, so much that can help drive increased giving, but an apprehension for nonprofit management or leaders to invest in that technology, or maybe just not even knowing, where do I start? There's so much, where do I start? So it can be overwhelming. So there's the study. You can search on it, Google it. I'm happy to share a link to it as well, but you can find it easily, and it's a really interesting study. All right, so these are the challenges. You know it, you feel it, you called them out before I even referenced the study, because you're living it. Now, how many of you have read the book, Generosity Crisis, or you've heard Nathan Chappell and Brian Crimmins speak? A few hands. All right, so I highly recommend this book. Pretty amazing. I mean, essentially, they're researchers, and they have taken the AFP Fundraising Effectiveness Project data. They have taken the Giving USA data. They've taken a lot of different sources of data, including data from Donor Search, one of their companies, and Changing Our World, and some of the clients that they work with. So a lot of amazing data to come together to say, we have a generosity crisis here in the US. And again, I've done some work and reading about Canada, and you're experiencing something very similar. Now, here's some of the data. So essentially, one of the biggest problems is that we have US household giving is significantly declining, right? So if we look at maybe 10 years ago, 2 out of every 3 homes in the US made charitable gifts, financial gifts to nonprofit organizations. If we look at the number of US households giving now, it's about 40%, right? So that's a pretty significant, to go from like 66% to 40%, and to see that decline is startling. And so often it's kind of snuck up on us, because giving had continued to increase until last year, right, until 2022. And I think that's more about kind of getting back to normal giving post-pandemic, when people were exceptionally generous. So all that to say, these mega donors and their 6, 7, 8-figure gifts have had us feeling like giving's continuing to go up. But we've not done the drill down in our own data to say, our giving may be going up, but our donors at the $500 level and below are drastically shrinking. And that's the trend. 96% of the decline in US household giving is from households that gave $500 or less. Those are our pipeline. Those are our leadership giving pipeline. Those are our major gift donors of the future. Those are our legacy gift donors of the future. And for many reasons, which we can talk about, they have felt like their gifts are not making a difference, or the economy has crunched them. Right? So there are a lot of different reasons why their giving has declined, and part of it is us. Part of it is us because, when I do fundraising effectiveness assessments with organizations, and I look at their donor retention rate of say, a donor who's giving 1,000 or higher, it's 70%, 80%. But when you look at those other gift value segments, very low and rapidly declining, because we simply don't have the time to steward them, to do those thank you calls, to include them in the thankathon, to have impact reports, or have those conversations, to tell them the stories that we tell our donors at larger gift values. So all that to say, this is why we need technology, right? To scale engagement, to personalize. Okay, so we have a problem. We're losing the base of our giving foundation. Donor retention continues to shrink. Giving continues to fall, the number of US households. So I encourage you to read that book. The first 100 pages are very difficult because it talks about the problem. Keep going, because after that, they talk about some solutions. And that's what we're going to talk about today, some solutions. All right. In fact, I do want to end on this quote from the authors. They say the number of Americans making charitable gifts has reached an all-time low, and statistics indicate that percentages of people giving to charity annually could decline to single digits in 49 years. So if 40% of Americans are giving to charities now, imagine it being 9% and what that will do to our sector and our ability to contribute to our communities and make change. All right, so I want to have just a quick table conversation about what are you doing to increase donor retention? Like, what are you doing that you see is effective? So just take a minute to chat amongst you and then maybe just do a few shares out loud. So go ahead, take a minute, talk amongst yourselves about what you're doing to effectively increase donor retention, and then be prepared to share. All right. I know that was so brief, but I would love to hear from some of you. What really bubbled up? I've lost control already. If I can have your attention back up front. All right, perfect. Mark, can we bring a mic? Yes. Oh, thank you. You're not Mark, but you're helping. Thank you very much.
I got one too.
Stand.
Mark
We
got
got two
taller.
mics. Tammy, we've got 2 mics in the room.
Oh, perfect. Okay, fantastic. Thank you for reminding me.
I'm Jenny from Music in the Mountains, and this is Larry from
Church World Service.
Church World Service. And we both discussed basically it's staying in touch with donors at all levels. Thank you calls, thank you notes, and reports.
And the key there, so good, at all levels. Keeping in touch with donors at all levels. All right, other shares?
We send pictures of our kids so they end up on their fridge at home.
Oh, I love that.
We send artwork from the kids too.
Yeah, so really bringing the mission to the donor.
Anyone?
Hi. Oh, sorry. Hi, I'm Carla, and this is Reg. She's from Kids on the Block, and I'm from United Friends of the Children. And one thing that we have in common is that we do cookie bakes, and we take cookies to donors. And we also make calls to the donors who, don't get cookies. So we make calls to everybody, but we give cookies to the major donors and call the donors who are on the lower level donors.
Yeah, good. So you're acknowledging those special touches, whether it's a phone call, maybe it's a token of appreciation, in your case, cookies, right? But the key is something inexpensive, right? Something inexpensive, yeah. And you mentioned re-bake the cookies for the major donors. Maybe even consider, yes, majors, but what about some monthly donors? What about some donors who've been giving for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, right? That would be a great way to expand what's already working for you. There was another thought here. Yes. Yes, you.
Me, okay. Yeah, so we kind of came to the realization that, when our donors know us, we're reaching out to them just to call and say, hi, how are your kids? How did that surgery go? Whatever. And that we kind of connected the dots to staff retention. When you're able to retain your staff and your donors know you,
Yes.
then that can help retain your donors.
Brilliant. Thank you. All right, so what I love about that is the correlation between the longevity of staff and the relationship they have with supporters. Like, there's that trusted relationship, and you're reaching out like not like how are you, but how are you? You meant like, how was the surgery? Or how are you? I wanted to give you an update about the special your favorite program, right? So very good, very good. All right, so let's just talk about a few other ideas. Prioritizing retention at every gift level, and I heard that over here. It costs 5 times more to acquire a donor than to keep a donor. So it just makes good sense. And this is a stat I want you to use when you're talking to your management about, here are the investments I want to make in donor retention. Very few organizations budget for stewardship. It's like that's some kind of magic fairy dust afterwards, and it's not. Those are intentional strategies, and they take tools. Invest in recurring giving programs that have a much higher donor retention rate, right? The average donor retention rate for a monthly giver is like 7 years. So let's keep our monthly givers. Or if you have a special leadership giving community, or maybe you have a women of philanthropy, or those kinds of recurring giving communities and circles, invest in those, prioritize them. Prioritize loyal donors. Again, not just gift values, but longevity. Who do you think is the most likely to leave you in their legacy plans? Monthly donors, or anyone who's been giving to you for many, many years. Focus on generosity over philanthropy. Philanthropy, how many of you feel like I am a philanthropist? Not so many hands. One hand, yes, there's a few hands. But how many of you feel like, I'm generous. I'm as generous as I can be within my means? Yeah, like every hand in the room. And so where are we losing donors? Maybe people who don't consider themselves philanthropists because it's $100 a year. It's $500. But they are generous. So let's use the word generosity frequently. It's more of a word that that's part of my identity. All right, invest in technology. Again, if we're going to scale the wonderful things that you do with gratitude and impact reporting and sharing the stories and those videos of the kids going to camp, or the wonderful candlelight vigil for those who have gone through your grief and loss program at the hospice center, we've got to invest in technology to scale this. And of course, we have to tell more stories. And I know I'm speaking to the choir here because you are at the Nonprofit Storytelling Conference. Here's an idea, and I can't take full credit for this. It came from a lot of I'll give credit at the end. Consider diversifying your donor portfolios. So right now, traditionally, we have our highest giving donors in our portfolios. Right? If you have the luxury of a major gift officer, or maybe you as a development director, you dedicate a percentage of your time to cultivating individual donors, they're typically the people who either are giving the largest gifts or who have the capacity and propensity to give the largest gifts. So what if we shook that up? What if we said we're also going to include some people who have been giving for a long period? We're going to consider lifetime value of their giving versus just what they gave last year. And we include them in those portfolios to get some of that special attention. What if we included a handful of middle donors or monthly donors, right? We had, you actually have a little microcosm of your donor pipeline in your portfolio. So let's just say that you have 500 monthly donors. Could you pilot this with taking 10 of them and putting them in a major gift portfolio and treating them with that kind of care and see what happens to their giving? Same with those middle donors. What if you were intentional about including people of color regardless of their giving? We all know people of color, if you look at the data, and I've been so fortunate to know Una Osili at the Indiana University Lilly School of Philanthropy, who is a head researcher in philanthropy from communities of color, and her data is very clear. People of color are incredibly generous, even more generous than Caucasian people relative to their means. And there are a lot of high net worth, very, very compassionate and charitable people of color in our communities. And yet if we look at our donor base, if we have our gala and we look out at the participants and a majority of them are Caucasian, they look like me, does that feel like a place where someone of color feels like, oh, I belong there? I'm welcomed there? So we need to get way more intentional about including people of color regardless of what they have given to us in the past. Right? They have a unique experience, a lived experience, points of view, expertise that's going to make us so much stronger. And they have their own networks that we desperately want to tap into to be more inclusive. And when we do that, I truly believe, and the research shows, we will see them also contributing to our organizations. And then we truly are diverse and inclusive, and we're honoring people, all the people in our communities. So this was not my idea. This was an idea from a wonderful man. He's Dr. Tyrone McKinley Freeman. He's also a professor at the Indiana University School of Philanthropy. He wrote the book, Madam C.J. Walker, Black Women's Philanthropy in the Time of Jim Crow. And I've had him on my podcast, The Intentional Fundraiser. He's brilliant. He's generous with his expertise, and he's really influenced the work that I do. And I encourage you to follow him, to read his work, and to follow the research that's available for free at the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. So that was his idea. Like, Tammy, like, just start including people of color and see what happens. So we should all, like, consider this, diversifying your major gift portfolios. Legacy givers, again, what if we included some legacy givers? All right, so Seth Godin, in his book, Song of Significance, he said, if it scares you, it might be a good thing to try. Just think about how risk averse we are in the nonprofit sector. I can tell you, most of my fundraising has been with organizations that serve children who have had mental and behavioral issues, right? They've experienced, many of them, abuse, or many of them have experienced trauma of some sort. And so we're like compliant. Our whole culture is compliance, as it should be, to protect these children. Yet, where does compliance stifle your fundraising? Now, I'm not talking about not being ethical. Yes, ethical, equitable, strategic. But sometimes we need to take risks. Sometimes we need to shake things up and do a little pilot, try new things out, invest in technology. All right, the second biggest challenge that we're facing as a sector is economic uncertainty globally. And so here's what we found. Here's what I found from the research, the experts who are leading these conversations. So the first thing is, remember the self-limiting conversations that you have with yourself, right? And don't let those stories influence, like, oh, gosh, times are tough. The economy's uncertain. I can't possibly ask, right? So check yourself, and then meet your donors where they are. And I mean that, like, physically. Like where are they giving? Are they giving at galas? Are they giving in response to offline direct response? Are they giving online? Like, meet them where they are. Communicate with them in the ways that they want to be communicated with. And then also meet them where they are from a personal perspective. How secure are they feeling? What choices are they willing to make in order to continue supporting your cause? Share the impact of the economy on your community. Like, yes, I understand. The economy is uncertain, and believe me, I'm nervous too. But I gotta tell you, the families that we're serving, the economy's even tougher on them. You know, the families who have lost a husband or a wife, a mom or a dad, and we've had the privilege of serving them through our hospice care. Like, the remaining people, like, they went from 2 paychecks to 1 paycheck on top of the grief that they're feeling, right? So again, just kind of level setting. Increased focus on support from donor advised funds. These are gifts that have already been made and they're waiting there to be distributed. And so identifying in your portfolio, in your community, who cares about your cause and has a donor advised fund. And one of the resources I'll direct you to is a resource called Definitive. Helen Brown, who's a brilliant prospect researcher, renowned author, expert, she has the only searchable database of donor advised funds, and you can subscribe to that, all right? It's a low cost, it's low fee, but there are lots of free resources on her website as well. But tap into donor advised funds. Leverage match gifts. And I'm sure, here we are at year end, you are likely tying up your match gifts that you can announce as part of your year-end appeal. They work. And just remember, it's all cyclic, right? So what comes up must come down. A lot of people say don't stop fundraising, and I agree with that, but really I say don't stop building relationships. That's the key. Don't just go like MIA because you think times are tough and people won't give. That's the time to really lean in and reconnect with them. Okay. I want to ask this question, just by show of hands. How many of you in your organizations, How many of you find that your budget, so budgeting for advancement, budgeting for marketing, putting resources into storytelling tools, how many of you see that that is considered an expense in your organization? Expense. Okay. How many of you feel that that is seen as an investment? About the same number of hands. Yeah, I mean, that really speaks to your culture of philanthropy, right? And so we need to talk in ways about the investment we're making in donor retention, the investment that we're making in scaling our monthly giving program, the investment that we're making in telling more compelling stories, stories with different voices. I remember Dan Frank. He was the head of our finance committee at the Children's Center. And when I was getting ready to submit my philanthropy, my fundraising team budget to him, to the board rather, I would always socialize it with him first. Here's what I want to do. Here's what it's going to take from a financial perspective. Here's the estimated return on that investment. I just wanted you to know before we have this conversation at the board level. And I will tell you, he had my back every single time. He would say, I vote to approve that because every time we give Tammy $1, she brings back $5. And that's true for you as well, but you've got to know your numbers. You've got to look at your data. You've got to understand which stories compel people to give. And in what environment do I share those, which have the greatest return on investment, right? So this is how you get strategic. This is how you get the resources you need to raise more money. Just like in business, and many of your board members are business people, you need to spend money to make money. You need to invest in fundraising and marketing and storytelling to raise contributions, to attract volunteers, to do all the good things, right? As Deborah, my CEO at the Children's Center, used to say to me, Tammy, no money, no mission. I'm like, that's right, no investment, no money, right? There is a relationship there. Okay, investing in technology. Let's talk about the staffing shortages. So here's a study that was published by the Chronicle of Philanthropy. Many of you have probably seen this, so I'm just gonna kind of buzz through it a bit quickly. What fundraising professionals say about their jobs and the sector. So 91% of the fundraising professionals that participated in the study said they want more time to meet with donors. How many of you want more time to meet with donors? Yes. And how many of you feel like you are burdened with a lot of administrative tasks that take you away from that? Yes. So maybe part of the investment that we're asking, part of the story we need to tell about the investment we need in our fundraising efforts, in our marketing efforts, is around, like, I want to increase the amount of face time with supporters. And here's what I think that will create from a financial perspective, from a donor retention perspective. And by the way, if we increase retention by X% based on the median gift value, that should be X amount more in contributions, right? Always think about return on investment. That's how you get what you need. All right, 92% of fundraisers who participated in their survey say that vacant positions are stressing their workload. Right? You're doing the jobs of too many people because there's a vacant spot. You can't find the right person. 94% report feeling stressed and unappreciated. How many of you feel stressed and unappreciated? Yeah. And those that didn't raise your hand is because your CEO is sitting next to you. Right? Like, you can kind of give me the high sign if you like. 82% say that development roles are unappreciated and undervalued as a general rule. Like, it's not just my organization, it's our profession is unappreciated, is not respected to the degree that it should be. And 89% said they don't have enough people to achieve their goals. And you've said it yourselves. This is a reflection of the feelings and what you're facing here in the room as well. So I want to just hear a little bit about what you're doing to attract and retain staff. Just a couple of shout outs, and we can bring you the mic. Who has something that's working? Oh, right there in the back. Would you stand? And Beth is going to bring you a microphone. Thank you. Thank you, Beth.
We are opening up more opportunities for people to be completely remote and that has attracted some amazing talent. And we find with communications, we can do our jobs quite well, only being together on campus several times a year.
Yeah, brilliant. How many of the rest of you are really exploring remote? I heard some applause over here. Yeah, flexibility. Like, let's do our work remotely and only come together a few times a year or once a month or whenever we really need to collaborate. And Zoom doesn't quite cut it. All right, excellent. Another idea? Oh, right here, center. Yeah, here comes Mark. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Alan from Lutheran Social Services in Anchorage, Alaska. I'm having a very hard time recruiting, and so I am now contracting. So I contract fundraising. I contract my chief storyteller. I'm hiring her next week. Accounting, all those positions that I can do contracted. So
love it.
It's worked.
It has worked. So, and I've heard about this. I mean, there's this movement called fractional fundraisers, right? Hiring a contract position of a fractional fundraiser. And some fundraising roles really lend themselves well to that, like your chief storyteller. I love that you have that title, that role in your organization. Like perhaps some of the marketing roles or the annual fund direct response roles. I don't know that it works as well in major gift work, but you know what? We're trying new things and let's go for it. Let's see what happens. Love that, love that. All right, so here are just a few more ideas. Flexible work environments, flexible schedule, cultivating a caring, inclusive, purpose-driven culture. And that goes back to one of the points we made earlier, and that was around pausing, taking a breath, thanking someone, acknowledging something that they did that was especially effective, or just like, thank you for showing up. Embody, of course, diversity, equity, inclusion, access. Like, these are the things, we need to attract more people of color, more people with diverse, like neurodiverse, physically diverse abilities to our sector, right? Bring their brilliance, bring their lived experience, bring all of those skill sets. And we need to be intentional about it. And that may be where we go to recruit them, right? So there's the AADO. I mean, there are a lot of movements, women of color in philanthropy, and I'm like an ally member of several of these. So there are places, so there are a lot of resources. I was gonna go rattle some more, but I'm gonna keep moving. Feel free to reach out to me, or there are a lot of, like you've got Frank here, we've had a lot of wonderful sessions here on diversity and fundraisers of color and attracting donors of color. So reach out to your resources, leverage your community. Maximize the power of appreciation and gratitude. We're so good about thanking our donors, we should also thank one another. We should thank our teams, our staff. Develop staff with ongoing personal and professional development. Now again, you're here, so your organization gets it, right? You are gonna go back as a stronger storyteller, a better fundraiser, a better marketing professional. Explore the emerging trend of menu-style compensation. So this is interesting, right? So, I'm willing to work for X amount, and I'd like more vacation, paid vacation time. I am willing to work X number of days, but 2 of them are remote, right? So again, being creative, meeting the needs of people, being flexible, and being equitable, right? You can't offer something to someone, this person, that you're not offering to other team members or other. So figure that out for your organization, and there are a lot of emerging resources around this. Include development staff in decision-making and problem solving. I mean, so often our fundraisers leave us because they feel like they weren't appreciated, they didn't have a voice in the direction of the department, they made decisions about my goal, I didn't have a voice in that, they made decisions about our stewardship program. Like, a lot of those are donors I'm accountable for, but they didn't ask my opinion. So include them and see how much stronger your programs will be and how much happier your staff will be as well. And then of course, AFP, thankfully, led and is leading the movement to include salaries on job descriptions and job postings, right? Salary ranges. So these are good things that will help. And then explore that technology piece, as I mentioned. Think about what are the things that are going to move the needle for you in the coming year, or that we need to do in the coming year that will reap that return on investment in year 2 or even year 3, right? So some of these tools and the results will be a long game. Some will have a shorter return on investment. You need to identify the tools. And again, we've got an incredible lobby full of partners to explore, like here are the different tools. So check it out, be strategic. Don't try to do all of them at once. I mean, you probably won't get funding for it anyway, but even if you could, it's a lot. So pick 1, pick 2 that makes sense for you. All right, playing it safe isn't that safe. Isn't that the truth? We need to take risks. We need to step up and be leaders, to speak our truth, Mark, to speak our truth, right? Truth to power, whether that power is the board, your boss, whomever that may be. And you'll make mistakes. You'll make lots of mistakes. That's what we do when we take risks. When we try new things, we make mistakes. But we still need to do it. We need to invest in innovation. We need to take thoughtful, strategic risks. We need to be transparent. Like, we're going to try this. We're going to pilot, kind of changing up a couple of portfolios to include monthly donors, longtime donors, people of color. We're going to pilot this. We're going to see what happens. And when we're transparent like that, people say, okay, let's try it, right? They're involved in it. And they know if it doesn't end well, like, okay, that was a great experiment. What did we learn? And how do we refine our strategy? Think for yourself. Don't fall into that herd mentality, and don't even fall victim to your own stories, the disempowering stories that so often we tell ourselves. Call yourself out on it. Catch yourself when you're saying, like, I'm just this, or I don't know enough, or I am new here, or this is the way we've always done it, right? Catch yourself and say, aha, this is a time to stop, to pause, to get diverse perspectives, and to really think this through, to have a dialogue, and be brave. You are brave. You're courageous. Oh my gosh, you're vulnerable to tell stories powerfully. You're brave enough to engage people and ask them for money. You're already brave. Turn that bravery inward as well. And here's what's interesting. When you take that approach as a buffalo, you charge into the storm, you're transparent, you're taking calculated risks, you're asking and getting investment from management. You're telling donors, like, here's what we're going to do. Like, we've never done this before, and we're going to try it. Your donors will trust you more. Your teams will trust you more. And the beautiful, unexpected thing is that you will begin to trust yourself more. Because you've tried things, you've failed, you lived, you learned, and you created something new that takes your organization to the next level. I want to end with a Seth Godin quote. Again, from his beautiful book, Song of Significance. And I was privileged to interview him on the my Intentional Fundraiser podcast about this book, so check that out. He's so inspiring. He said, we trust people because they showed up when it wasn't convenient, because they told the truth when it was easier to lie, and because they kept a promise when they could have gotten away with breaking it. So I want you to channel your inner buffalo. Bring your best thinking. Be brave. Be that incredible buffalo. Be the leader you were born to be. And don't be a cow. Thank you.